Gothic is an RPG you're likely to not have heard of if you're on the younger side of my audience. But what if I told you that this 2001 game made by the small German studio Piranha Bytes achieved the feat of inspiring the whole genre, including the Witcher games? There's a reason why Gothic and its sequel are by far the channel's most requested reviews. So many requests over the years. A special thanks should be given to the aptly named Gothic Review Fund for his generous contribution to my Patreon page, where everyone is welcome to chip in to their heart's content. And without further ado, let's see if the wait was worth it. Gothic puts you in an atypical position compared to most RPGs. You're in the shoes of a nameless convict that's thrown into a prison colony. In case you haven't rushed already to the keyboard, The Elder Scrolls has you play as a former prisoner that gets released on good behavior to let him pursue his dreams. So that's totally different, by the way. Said colony is technically a work camp because its purpose is to mine as much magical ore as possible to aid the kingdom in a losing war against the orcs. The trick is that everyone thrown in there cannot leave, as a magical barrier prevents anyone from departing, including the mages who screwed up and trapped themselves as well in the process. From here on, you have free reign over the path you choose, and by path I mean climbing a steep hill, because Gothic for sure doesn't miss any chances to tell you to know your place. If you're enjoying being talked down, bullied, extorted, beaten, or simply treated like crap, the first part of the game's got you covered, you fucking masochist. All RPGs start you at the bottom of the pecking order, but this is taking it to the extreme. I don't remember any game where I was constantly approached by guards for protection money and then be ambushed by other colonists as punishment for refusing to give in. Same goes for the situation of being picked on by a plantation guard, being tasked to give water to farmers, and being threatened with beatings if I don't do it every single day. The clear definition of social hierarchies on the one hand makes me go, German hands touch this, but on the other it gives the world of Gothic a lot of personality from the get-go. It's not just you who witnesses firsthand the societal mechanisms of its world, but the NPCs are just as much under its influence. Remember the dick who wanted to slap me around if I didn't give water to plantation farmers? Well, once I gained enough experience to lay it on him, I'm the one who can force him to do this.
The peasants look thirsty.
I'll see to it, don't worry.
Yeah, I thought so, bitch. This was already impressive for 2001, but the reality is that it wasn't even the best feature related to NPCs. That's because Gothic pioneered the concept of them having daily schedules to adhere to. Before the good old Todd Howard wowed everyone with his radiant AI buzzwords when Oblivion came out, Gothic was the first RPG in which NPCs were something more than just static quest dispensers. They wake up, they go to perform their tasks, they take their time to eat, to chat with their friends, and at the end of the day they go back to sleep. The guards will do their regular patrols, the blacksmith will tinker around with his workshop, the miners will toil away, and so on. Depending on the hour you're trying to find them, NPCs can be anywhere as their schedules have them move from one place to the other. In a time where all RPGs had their NPCs waiting idly for the protagonist to interact with them, Gothic blew everyone out of the water by creating a world that seemed to be alive. The world building, and especially the way it's conveyed, contributes quite a lot to this feeling. You've got the classical books with bits of lore to peruse at your leisure, of course, but your interactions with the NPCs do a great job in creating the overall atmosphere. You're quickly brought up to speed with the colony's setup, familiarized with how things are done here, and the factions that are in charge of everything. But for me, my favorite bit of writing concerns the skill training. Every time your character learns something new, his teacher gives a detailed explanation about the skill. You're not just learning how to chain up a combo when taking weapon lessons, for example, but you're told how you're supposed to wield the sword and the stance you need to take. And you don't simply unlock the ability to sneak, but hear how you're supposed to use your feet and body to walk silently. There are some meta hints, such as how to control your attacks to perform combos with melee weapons, but they're worded in a way that sounds very plausible in the context of the conversation. It's loads of fun seeing the thought put into these descriptions, despite the fact that they're just window dressing at the end of the day. The prison colony is not the usual affair. Sometime after the magic barrier was set up, the prisoners revolted and took control of the whole thing. So the guards that try to shake you down are prisoners just like you instead of actual wardens, which makes the whole thing funnier than it already was. The prisoners are not united in their goals because shortly after the revolt they ended up splitting into 3 camps. The old camp is composed of those that were happy to strike a deal with the king and keep supplying magic ore in exchange of goods brought from the outside. This made Gomez, the leader of the old camp, the strongest man in the colony. Here the hierarchies are maintained very strictly, but the upside is that it's the most prosperous camp. But some of the prisoners did not want to live the rest of their lives trapped in this place, so they went off and created a new camp. Here they planned to blow up the barrier with the help of some of the mages and the biggest stockpile of magic ore they can mine. These guys live in a borderline anarchy, since one of their main rules is that might makes right, but the lack of authority is something enduring as well. After all, these guys act the closest to what you'd expect from a prisoner that wants to escape. They just want out, and that's all they care about at the end of the day. Then you have the so-called Brotherhood of the Sleeper, which are a weird bunch. These are prisoners who claim to have been shown visions from a god that promises to free them if they are able to awaken him. So their course of action was to live for the swamps, smoke weed every day, and meditate just like anyone else would do in their shoes. These are extremely absorbed in their worship of the sleeper and by far the most spiritual of the bunch. The main questline has you go around all 3 camps anyway, and you don't have a big number of side quests that are camp specific either. Besides it being a role-playing decision, each brings their own perks, such as the old camp having the only crossbow trainer, or the Brotherhood having quick access to magic training. I wanted to join the new camp, but then I had to settle for the old one because, the game's quests veer into the arcane sometimes. Let me explain. First of all, just as a comparison, the old camp's admission is rather straightforward. You are told to complete a so-called test of faith and perform errands for several influential members before they can vouch for you. This translates into performing several quests until you're able to pass a not mentioned but still logical threshold and get admitted. Even if I didn't try to approach the sect camp, I know that joining them has a similar mechanic. Well, the new camp doesn't act like this. Oh no, even getting to the person responsible for assigning you the task is not straightforward, because in this case it's the camp's second in command and you need to get past his bodyguard first. You're in the early stages of the game, so you'll definitely get your shit beaten out of you if you try to fight your way in, so that option falls from the start. So you're left with 2 possibilities, and bear with me on this one. You either go to the old camp and talk to this guy, Thoros, about getting a task from him. Thoros is the leader of the camp's guards, a rank above the shadow that you'd be a part of if you are to join them instead. I mention this because you're told to go to him once you get in favor with the old camp people, since he's not actually in charge of handling your admission. And yet, to get to Thoros' quest, you have to badger him repeatedly about doing some work for him. The quest involves getting rid of a member of the new camp who does shady business in the old camp. You can kill him, but for your purposes, you need to convince him to leave and under your escort, because he will give you a ring you can present to the bodyguard that allows you to get through him. You got all that? That was one of the options, by the way. The second option is, hilariously, using a charm spell scroll on the bodyguard. Yes, you can do that, and it even creates an extra good impression on the boss compared to the other way. But this guy will tell you to only bring something valuable from the old camp to be allowed in, which is already pretty vague. You can rob all of the old camp and you won't find anything that will help you, because it's actually about the list from the mine. What list am I talking about? It's the one that's part of the old camp's test of faith, and it's the one that I already delivered back thinking the XP will serve me well. What I was actually supposed to do was to take the list to the new camp, let the leader make the changes to it, and give it to the old camp as intended. So, because I did not know I have to cast charm on the bodyguard and finish the delivery of the list before I even get access to meeting the new camp's leader, I lost any chance of joining them. On the one hand, I have to appreciate the way it it makes sense to have all these things done the way they are, but on the other, I highly doubt there were many others who navigated this convoluted progression successfully without any prior knowledge. I'm not ranting, I'm totally chill about it. The game's questing system does fall into this area a few more times, but never to this extent. Despite the frustration I surely not made obvious, I can't be too harsh on this topic. After all, Gothic comes from an era where not picking up the right items or dropping quest items you are not even aware they were quest items to begin with can get your progression soft-locked, so that's also a reminder why you must never ever under any circumstances sell every last copy of any item you pick up. But a really nice part about the quest is that the dialogue and the journal entries give you plenty of information to work with. There are no magic map markers to follow, all you have to work with is in the description of the places you need to go and some directions to follow. The game doesn't have a map in the traditional sense because here there are objects you obtain throughout your adventures and they each have their own uses. Some cover specific areas and those that cover the entire prison colony have varying degrees of detail. The fact that they're all hand-drawn by people who obviously aren't professional cartographers is an added layer of immersion which I really enjoy seeing. Progression is handled rather interestingly in Gothic. You gain experience points by killing enemies and completing quests, and you level up as you'd expect in an RPG. What's particular about Gothic's approach is that leveling up doesn't instantly raise your stats besides your life total, but instead you earn so-called skill points. This name is a bit of a misdirection because in traditional RPGs you are free to spend them at the moment you get them, while here you can only spend them at trainers. These are characters who are willing to increase a skill or one of your attributes, usually in exchange for money. This approach is interesting not only because it makes progression a very deliberate affair, but it also gives an extra importance to your choice of camp to join, since each has a certain skilled trainers available at various stages of the game. But more interestingly, progression is a core part of Gothic's design in more ways than one. At the start of the game, you're weak to the point where most enemy encounters are fatal. This is a deliberate choice because the game's map is designed to prevent you from accessing certain areas until you're strong enough, which is a significantly more organic way of doing things. Enemies don't scale to your level, so the pack of wolves that you had to run away from earlier can be killed quite easily after you invest some points in your character. It's certainly enjoyable to finally outdo the enemies that were giving you a hard time in the past, but unfortunately this transition is very steep. I'm not talking about hard enemies becoming challenging yet approachable, but literally impossible monsters becoming absolutely trivial. The good part is that as you progress through the story, you unlock new areas that bring new enemies that pose a challenge, but still makes the rest a breeze. And the reason for this is how combat works. The damage system is surprisingly simple. Each attack deals damage equal to the sum of the weapon's attack value and its defining attribute, strength or dexterity, with defense being deducted from that. I'm not lying about being surprised, I was honestly expecting defense to be a percentage modifier instead, because the result is quite silly. Stronger enemies not only deal a ton of damage to you, that's to be expected, but also have a high defense compared to your damage, leading to you being either completely unable to hurt them or just very slowly chipping away at them. Ironically, the latter case is actually worse because it leads to extremely cheesy encounters that really highlight the worst parts of the combat. But after you level up your stats and gain access to stronger weapons, these impossible enemies suddenly turn into fodder for your attacks. Those packs of wolves blocking your access I mentioned earlier are now getting one shot in mass as part of a completely benign interruption of your stroll. It doesn't feel like you're upping the challenge of your fights, but as if you're blowing your roadblocks without any prejudice. This is further exacerbated by the combination of a really awkward control scheme and a combat system that's not faring much better. The controls, even used optimally, are clunky to say the least. As a small parenthesis, I think I made a mistake learning acrobatics because it gave me access to this fucking Wolverine jump and I have to keep using it since it's faster than just running. But when it comes to actually controlling your weapon swings, it's very weird. You essentially have to stay in place and simultaneously press the action key and a directional button to make a swing. At least after you learn the timings, combos are fairly easy to perform. With some training you can get used to this strange way of doing things, and leveling up your weapons will allow you to pull off smoother combos, but it's never going to feel alright. Ranged attacks are slightly better, but not by much, and it's not gonna matter much anyway, because the game's story pigeonholes you into using a melee weapon anyway in the endgame. But the worst part in all of this is that your swings don't connect with the enemy's model unless your camera is in the right direction and actually focuses on him. One-on-one it doesn't matter that much, but if you're surrounded by multiple enemies that are moving around you and you're just swinging hoping to deal damage, well, tough luck, because you're not hitting anything despite what the animations are showing you. And it's a shame combat is like this, because despite being the most interesting part of the game, questing and interacting with NPCs is the smallest part of the game. Most of the time will be spent roaming the map and fighting, forcing you to face the jank on a constant basis. When it comes to the game's economy, my opinion is a bit mixed. On the one hand, it's really cool that there's a whole assortment of hunting skills that allow you to harvest various parts of the monsters you kill for you to make money when you return to the city. You can even take steel rods and shape them into swords to sell at a profit, which reminds me that it's ironic that the first Kingdom Come Deliverance did not have this feature. All this money can be funneled into purchasing strong pieces of armor and weapons to aid your travels. But on the other side, the economy is extremely easy to destroy and make completely irrelevant. Because you see, once you learn the skills of sneaking and lockpicking, you are free to rob everyone blind with no consequences for doing so, helped in large part by the awful AI detection. As long as nobody sees you enter a house, and believe me, with their super short sight range that's not much of a challenge, you are free to loot their chests of valuables. Lockpicking is trivial because each chest has a predetermined combination that you can discover through trial and error. Yeah, sure, save scamming is bad and all that, but the fact of the matter is that picking locks has zero RNG in it, so you can just memorize through multiple failed tries until you finish the sequence. Ironically, if this was RNG, it would have made training lockpicking past the first level actually worth it. The consequence of this is that you're swimming in money from early on and completely eliminate the economy for the rest of the game. This means that the only progression you've got left is simply leveling up so you can increase more attributes past the requirement of stronger weapons. Stealing is rewarding in part because the inventory system has no limits to it. You can carry an infinity of copies of any object you desire since there's no such things as space or carrying capacity to worry about. But a criticism that pertains it to a more general level is its terrible UI with lists that you have to scroll through page by page, no shortcuts or helpful functions. Stuff like filters or sorting options are downright sci-fi as well. If you happen to be a loot goblin like me, it becomes an absolute nightmare to use. Case in point, changing my ranged weapon in the late game takes a lot of time simply because I have to go to my weapons tab, scroll all the way down below each and every melee weapon I have collected, and only then select the new bow that I purchased. If you find it odd I haven't mentioned anything about the story outside of the initial setup, you shouldn't be surprised when I say there's nothing much to it. After joining either of the camps, you'll quickly get in the position of assisting the sect camp with their attempt of invoking the sleeper. The process does not go well, as the leader of the Brotherhood is gravely injured in the aftermath of having a vision which reveals the evil nature of their god.
Yes, Master. What has happened? What have you seen?
He wanted to show us the way to freedom.
Yes, what about it?
Was it the path to freedom?
Silence!
All we can do is hope that it is not too late for Iberian. Iberian is dead. Our spiritual leader has left us.
Before he dies, he urges you to go to the new camp and assist their escape plans of blowing up the stockpiled magic core to destroy the barrier. To do this, after collecting the required artifacts, the presence of all the mages in the old camp is necessary. The second part reaches a bit of an impasse because as you're about to get in contact with them, you receive the news that the old camp assassinated almost all of its mages in the midst of a power struggle and have set out to capture the mine controlled by the new camp. This marks a big turning point in the game. On the one hand, from here on, the old camp becomes almost inaccessible and that faction turns hostile even if you join them initially. That's actually a cool thing to have happened after going through so many errands for admission. But on the other, it's the start of the campaign's railroading. Until now, there are all sorts of small quests you could do for all factions, and the world building I talked about earlier was in full swing. But after this event, the game turns into a linear and barren affair. There's almost nothing to be done outside of the main storyline and no more interactions with the game's factions. The story only accelerates from here. You're tasked with finding Zardoz, the most powerful mage in the colony that went into hiding, and win his help for the new camp's escape plan. But Zardoz disagrees this will work because the real reason the barrier got out of control at its creation was that the Sleeper, an archdemon created by the orcs, interacted with it in its bid to be brought back into the mortal world. There's a lot of back and forth for information and artifacts, and the devs at least had the courtesy to equip us with the teleportation spells that take us back to major landmarks. Thank God. The end goal is to go to the Sleeper's temple and banish it, because of course he ended up being woken up by the time you arrive there. If that doesn't sound spicy enough, don't worry, this entire section of the game is rushed, buggy, and a downgrade to the first part of the game. It's kinda sad how visible the lack of detail is becoming more and more obvious. It's so bad that I've had to start using console commands to get unstuck from pits with ungrabbable ledges, or literal cheats to kill enemies that are unjustifiably resistant to the endgame super weapon and your beefed up character compared to the rest of this level. And no, I made sure I took the right order in this quest, so don't give me grief. I'm talking about enemies that cast spells that keep you in a near constant stun lock with almost no way to escape them once you get caught, and that instantly target you, giving you no ability to dodge them once you are in the range, as well besides those that take almost no damage for no reason. And don't get me started with the temple having switches that need to be shot with an arrow when the whole rest of the game never had anything like this in it as well, because it's never too late to introduce your players to new mechanics, I guess. The endgame boss fight is hilarious because it involves interacting with 5 objects while the Sleeper is sitting on a platform lobbing fireballs at you, and a bunch of fanatic acolytes rush you down the moment they spot you. Actually, the latter part only happened until I died the first time, now they're gone completely. Anyway, said 5 objects have a slow interaction animations, which wouldn't be that much of a problem if they actually had clipping on them. So to activate each, you are guaranteed to get stun locked at least once by the Sleeper's slow moving fireball that can phase through these pillars. That doesn't even sound bad until, for some reason, the Sleeper just teleported in front of one of the pillars when I loaded the save, meaning I could not complete the sequence since he instantly makes your character fall asleep if you get too close to him. You see this fancy cinematic? Yeah, I triggered it with a console command because this bug soft-locked me out of the game's ending, holy hell! It's a big disappointing to finish Gothic in these terms. The rest of the game has its serious dose of jank and awkwardness, but it has a solid foundation to work on. Its role-playing part of the RPG is really good, but man, this last section looks and plays like something you'd find in a shovelware section of a Turkish store filled with bootleg games. That being said, it was nice going through Gothic, even as someone who only played the sequel. Despite all that I said regarding the lack of side quests in the second half of the game, it still took me roughly 25 hours to explore all of it. That's not too shabby. Thanks to everyone for watching. Click the buttons, leave your thoughts below, and share this with your like-minded fellows. And until next time, cheers!